Welcome to you three. I saw you were hanging out in the chat just before making lots of noise. That was delightful. Before we get going with this, which is Ross talking about how to do SEO like a management consultant, which I think is slightly impressive. Yes, I'm kind of scared about this one because it's going to make me feel very amateur. I'm just going to remind people who are watching that this is being recorded. You can come back and watch it afterwards. If there's like a lady, for example, she gave so much information, you might want to watch that again to actually get the information a second time to make sure it's really sunk in. This one's being recorded too, so you can watch Ross again and then the discussion with Juliette and Gerry. This one's going to be an hour because there's so much to say. Second one is please do remember to ask questions. Try and be as clear as possible. Remember that we don't really have the context of the question, so make the question as clear as possible so that the people who are answering them really know what it is you're asking, and we can give very precise, very helpful answers to you. And thirdly, please do share with us where you are because we'll put it on the screen. And talking of which, we'll start with Ross. You must be in London, I'll be betting.
I am indeed, Jason. How are you doing? How many of these have you done so far? You're a couple hours in?
No, just 1 hour in. I'm not tired yet.
Okay, so we're not cracking the beers open yet. But yes, I'm London Bridge at the moment. It was impressive to see where everyone's coming in from, actually. Truly global, international audience.
Brilliant. And SEO is dead, apparently, at your agency?
That's right. SEO is dead. Google is slowly killing it. That's the first thing I ever bought for the agency, that and the beer fridge, which is actually also just behind me. You got to get your priorities right when you're starting a business. So neon signs and beer fridges are the two things you need.
I saw in a photo of your office that you also bought a bowl of fruit and it had apples, oranges and bananas in it.
That's right, it did. Well, we actually have a fruit subscription for the guys. We actually have a lamp that's a banana lamp that looks a little bit conspicuous. So I make sure that the juniors don't see that on their first day, just in case I get some sort of HR complaint. Brilliant
stuff. Now on to Juliette. Lovely to see you again. Is it Rooyen? Is that about right? Van Rooyen?
Van Rooyen, yes.
Oh, Van Rooyen, excuse me. Where are you? You're in Holland by any chance?
Shockingly, no. I'm not even from Holland originally. I'm actually South African. I did marry into a very Dutch family though, so I can kind of get it. No, I'm in London, just down the Jubilee line in Greenwich.
Okay, brilliant stuff. And if you could be somewhere else, where would you be?
Cape Town, without a doubt.
Oh, that was really quick.
It's where I'm from. It's warm weather. I know that my fridge is fully stocked with gin. Like all the good things are there. Plus, you know, my husband and my family and all of that stuff.
Brilliant stuff. And we've met a couple of times at conferences. You're incredibly smart and know lots of things. So we'll be asking you lots of questions later on. And Gerry too is very smart and he's got a beautiful view and he's in London too, I'll bet.
Absolutely. Yes, Greenwich as well. Literally, if I look out the window, I can see the O2, which is, and I can see some boats going past at the moment because we're quite high up. So, yep, absolutely.
I thought you were going to say, when I look out the window, I can see Juliette's jumper.
Well, no, because there's a wall between us.
Oh, right. Okay. I'm being naive again. And Gerry, you run Take It Offline, which is an amazing event that I went to in Amsterdam and in London, and it's going to be in Bucharest.
Absolutely. Yep. We're just sort of making the final plans. We're getting as many people as involved as possible. It's going to be the same kind of format, an unconference, meeting kind of great panels, great people, sort of an audience-led approach. And hopefully we will kind of be able to deliver exactly the same sort of feel as we did in Amsterdam, but less hangovers.
Oh, right. Yeah. Ross, you were there last time. And was it great?
It was. From the bits I remember, I remember it being quite nice. I've got a tattoo on my backside that says Gerry for life with a big love heart on it. I don't know how that got there, but I've managed to.
Gee, that wasn't me. That was somebody else.
All right. Yeah. So
no, it's the banana one. The banana man flavored one was me.
All right. Okay. So in between the festivities, we do actually talk a lot about SEO, and I think one of the things that Gerry was saying is it's an unconference. So the whole point is it's kind of no one's recording anything and nothing's going to be said outside of it. So you can really kind of let rip, if you like, and just give away all your kind of top secrets, knowing that it won't end up in some forum somewhere and be spammed to death tomorrow.
Okay. Absolutely. And today you're going to give us your secret about doing SEO like a management consultant, which is top secret? No.
No, I think a lot of this stuff is common sense, you know. The whole thing with the SEO industry is we tend to be really good at tactics. We're very good at writing a list of things to fix, but it's not really that compelling. And working with enterprise clients, as you tend to do, the kind of longer in the tooth you become in the world of SEO, I don't think I ever really mention or talk about SEO in order to get it done. So it's just one of those things. How do you actually build a strategy that's compelling to get things done rather than a laundry list of tasks?
And isn't that just the best introduction to your own talk? So I think I'll let you get on with it with that amazing introduction you did for yourself.
Oh, thank you very much, Jason.
So over to Ross, and we'll be back in about half an hour with answering your questions, chatting with Juliette and Gerry. Off you go, Ross. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. So, Juliette and Gerry, can you just confirm that you can see my big round Scottish face in the slides?
Yes.
Thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to be asking you guys some questions as we go through, just to keep it interesting and kind of interactive. So hello everyone that's joining in the chat. My name's Ross. I'm the managing director at Type A Media, and today I'm going to tell you a little story before we get into it. This is my original crew back in 2018 when we started out. These are the kind of 4 people that we started with. Fast forward a couple of years later, and it grew considerably larger, and it kind of keeps doing that. So when we kind of started out, we were working with these kind of cool startups and kind of small to medium size enterprises. And then as you kind of, the more you go on, you start working with these kind of big global brands, and these big massive entities. And when I was working with all the SMEs, Gerry and Juliette, I know you guys do a bit of freelancing. Every single time you get a freelance client or an SME client, what do they say? Do all the things. Because they're like, well, I want you to come in, fix all the SEO things and make me rank immediately. But both of you have come from corporate and enterprise level backgrounds. And what happens when you're at work? They say things like, well, yeah, SEO is important to our business. We really, really care about it. Here's 7 layers of people that you need to speak to before you can change a title tag or fix a broken link or change some copy. It's a very different mindset, and it's a very different process. And there's been a bunch of things that I've learned working with the SMEs, and a bunch of things I've learned working with these kind of larger brands that we can use to build a kind of proper strategy. Now, with SMEs, typically you're doing things like these big, massive, 200-page audits, and then you're in just completing tasks as fast as you possibly can. Sometimes they actually give you CMS access, which is one of the most terrifying things that you can possibly get from a client when they're like, oh yeah, there you go, just log in and you change it. And you're like, oh no, are you asking me to make fundamental changes to your server configurations? I don't know how comfortable I am doing that. There's no real priorities either. Like, no one particularly cares if what you do first, as long as things get done. 0 cause and effect, because the client ultimately is just like, I just want rankings, I just want traffic. Gerry and Juliette, could you maybe answer, if you've ever done any freelancing, have you ever had a client and they just want to rank for like a keyword?
Yep, so often. And you kind of do the maths, you do the calculations, you kind of go, that was great. You'll get about 100 visits a year when you kind of work it out almost. And the conversion rate of that particular keyword is going to be low because you know exactly that, it's the long tail that always converts much better.
Yeah. They're always up to sort of 1-2 word key terms, and they've got this cluster of about 5 in their head that this is their dream cluster and this is all they want. But if you work out how much work it's going to get there to get to the points where, if that's what they consider a success metric, the amount of time your ROI on that work is going to be abysmal for the business. It'll be great for you as a freelancer because they're still paying you. But as a business, it's not worth it. And it's very hard to also to be an ethical SEO and convince them of this.
Yeah, and this is a problem you can come up with a lot of the SMEs, and we're kind of building that problem into the industry. When you then kind of flip it and look at enterprise, the complete opposite is then true. So they're all about, show us a strategy, show us what we're going to do over a 12-month period, write business cases, something that you never need to do for an SME because they don't have any time to look and think about the business case. It's all high leverage activity. So I don't think I've ever given anyone an SEO strategy and we've had like a nice to have section and we've ever actually done the nice to haves. They literally might as well be ripped up and put straight in the bin. Everything is very, very carefully planned because they've got usually media cycles, they've got advertising cycles, they've got promotions going on. So you actually need to like be cognizant of that and fit in with that. And absolutely everything is signed off. One of the most ridiculous pieces of sign off I ever had. I won't name the brand. They're a high street chemist. That kind of lowers the amount of people it could possibly be. For every single drop down in their menu, there was a channel manager for that, and they all had to sign off anything that was going site wide. So literally to get, perhaps a title tag changed or maybe the links in the footer changed, every single one of them had to sign off on it. So you had to speak to 10 people to get a yes. All right, and a little bit about his client history. We've won about 50 accounts over the last 3 years. Go us. But we've kind of changed. Like we went from really heavy execution to we're now like pretty much all consultancy. And kind of went from this, we all know how to like do SEO, right? So I can look at a site, my team can look at a site, and we know what to do and what to fix. The major problem though is like not knowing the big picture makes it actually hard to start fixing things. Or even worse, if you actually go and get your laundry list of like quote unquote fixes and you implement them all and nothing happens. I'm sure both of you have never been in that particular situation, but back in the day, like we would go through these SME clients and we would go get their site perfect, health, internal links were amazing, all the content gaps were filled, the whole thing, and still we weren't quite sure the value that we were producing. When it comes to dealing with like what value is inside of kind of client contracts, there's kind of 3 modes that you typically get. Now, you only want it to be the perceived value matches the actual value, because if the client knows the work you're doing and knows the value of it, that's fantastic. A lot of people actually sometimes think when they see, if the client thinks there's a higher perceived value than the actual value they're getting, so they think they're getting more than they actually are, a lot of people are like, oh, that's amazing, but it really isn't. I'm going to tell you why. This is the ideal. So whatever we're making for them, they see the value in it and it's perfectly aligned. The reason being is they need to know how complex the work you're doing is. And you need to have like honest conversations around growth and actually getting buy-in to do more work over time. This is a bit of a nightmare situation that a lot of people fall into. Guys, back in the day when you were at kind of smaller outfits, have you ever had a client be like, why am I paying you? Like, why are we doing this? Like, why is it taking so long? Like, what are the common objections you get when you're working with smaller businesses?
Lack of resource. But I mean, that's not just a smaller business. That's businesses of every size. It's, why am I paying you to do this work when I also now have to pay the resource to actually execute the work if you're doing consultancy and strategy? But I mean, the biggest thing is, why are we doing this if we don't have the resource to execute on it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, I mean, the amount of times that we've sort of seen the same kind of thing, it's like we kind of give them kind of suggestions and they do like 20% of it. And you kind of go, well, you have to do like at least 80% of it to see the ROI. You do half of it and you've just kind of like wasted your money almost.
Yeah, that's a challenge. It's a huge challenge.
Absolutely. Now, this is a weird one here where, have you ever been in a situation with a client or maybe with some internal stakeholders where they think you're doing even better than you're actually doing? So they just think the sun shines out of your back end. They're like, everything you do is amazing. Like every time you go on a call with them, they're like, yeah, you're the best. I think this is great. And they're just really they're like a Dalmatian puppy coming. They're just so full of energy. They absolutely love you. A lot of people think that's fine, but actually if you're an agency and you've got a client like this is a ticking time bomb. The reason being is like, there's going to be a point where your contract stops and you're going to need them to like fly your flag and fight in your corner to get further like buy-in from all of their stakeholders. And if they fundamentally don't understand what you're doing and the value it's having on their business, you're out the door, you're done. And the thing is, when you do a retrospective review with someone who actually knows what they're doing, then that actually turns into this original scenario. They're like, but you're now 12 months in and you've just given them no real value. So we're going to talk about perception versus reality. What tends to happen is if you don't have a clear strategy with defined measurements and no quantitative and qualitative, flipping heck, that's a mouthful, feedback loops, then you're going to be in a real bit of bother. Now, What is the difference between strategy and tactics? Well, for me, strategy is what to do, tactics are how to do it. It's a very subtle difference, but it actually is all the difference in the world. So a strategy example would be, we're going to write a blog post to capture more leads, very top level, and we roughly know what direction we're going. And a tactic will be, we'll write X blog posts about Y subject and publish them on Z timeline to promote them in ABC channels to drive more leads. Like, we're getting granular, we're getting details, and it's actually into the execution part of what we're doing. Now, in my mind, the purest SEO strategy isn't actually a Word document or a spreadsheet. It's actually a bubble chart where I can see the value to the business of each of the things we're going to do, whether that's landing page creation, speed updates, image optimization, versus the cost and difficulty of implementation. Because if I've got a laundry list of 100, 200, 300 things to do, we need to know what order to do them in, why it's going to matter to the company. And ultimately, it always comes down to show me what's easy to implement and high value. In our kind of language, you've probably heard people say, just give me the low-hanging fruit. Like, that's the constant conversation you're having with people. So as an SEO, if you can build your strategy around having good long-term vision, as well as nailing the low-hanging fruit at the start, you're going to really ramp up the communication with your client, and they're going to be implementing a lot more. One thing to note as well, like, once you do this value to ease of implementation strategy, you're actually going to have a bunch of stuff come out as kind of semi-pointless tasks, which as an SEO, we all love data. We all love all the little incremental things you can do. But 9 times out of 10, I think, Gerry, you said, like, there's they'll do 20% of the work you tell them when they actually need to do 80%. I suppose it's finding those pointless tasks, those nice to have it, and wiping them out and just to get them to focus.
Yeah, I mean, one of my pet hates about a lot of agencies is the fact they're kind of so obsessed with kind of fixing things that look really, really, really kind of effective, but you kind of go, actually, there's no actual value in doing that. You know, it's especially when I've been client side, the amount of times where I kind of look for it, long lists of things which will be quite expensive, but will have very little value. As you say, it's kind of like, how do you actually say, you know, what should we really get done? What's critical? And sometimes it's more expensive to do the critical stuff, but it will have a significant commercial impact.
Yeah. Juliette, have you ever had a situation where you've been dealing with an agency and then they give you like a bunch of recommendations that are so brutally hard to implement and so completely out of the development life cycle of the business? You're just like, well, I get that, you know, this looks fancy, but there's no way of implementing this. Like, can you talk about any of those examples that you've kind of came across?
One kind of sticks out in my head. With one of the biggest clients I've worked with, when I received a recommendation for a series of optimizations that were things like you need to update the page titles and you need to do X, Y, and Z with the meta descriptions. We were talking about millions and millions and millions of pages, and their idea of an SEO strategy was to tell us that we needed to fix things like that, things that and small scale SEO fixes that were not. They were looking at sort of 1 or 2 pages, as opposed to looking at, this is the page type, or this is the category that we're looking at. We need to look at it as a wider view. So it was a lot of what I would call busy work and things that you could check off and say to the client, hey, we did 5 out of the 10 deliverables this month, as opposed to going, what's actually going to drive the value in the long run.
Yeah, the busy work thing. We've definitely been guilty of that, and we've got ourselves in hot water for producing what we think are beautifully complicated and fancy looking deliverables that are ultimately completely useless. So in my mind, SEO happens in 2 parts. You've kind of got your auditing and research part, and you've got your implementation. So inside of the auditing bit, you've got things like keyword research, technical audits, content analysis, all that good stuff. And then once you wrap all of those deliverables up, you're into then actually doing the implementation. Maybe that's updating meta, fixing 404s, like granular tactical kind of stuff. Now, the interesting thing about those 2 things, of the auditing bit and the implementation bit, the project management styles are fundamentally different. And this is one of the things that no one talks about in SEO. If you're doing a tech audit or keyword research, that's waterfall. It's all sequential. One thing has to happen before the other one can happen, and there really can't be a lot of interference or backwards and forwards to get that done. Whereas when it comes to implementation, especially around things like if you're doing any outreach or content development, there's loads and loads of back and forth. There's lots of sign-off processes. And what you're trying to do there is plan to get as much out in a 2-week period as humanly possible. Like I say, waterfall, sequential, one is after the other, and agile, which a lot of people would say, oh, we're an agile agency, or we work in Scrum or something like that. That's how they would typically work, but they would apply that to everything, which I think is fundamentally wrong. All right, so let's have a look at building the actual strategy. Like before we even get to the strategy, we have a process called REST. It stands for Research, Evaluation, Strategy, then Tactics. What happens in most SEO agencies and a lot of people that we talk to is they just go straight to tactics. They're like, right, do a tech audit, do keyword research, go, 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 which is fine if you've got a 10-page website, but there's so much more that you need to do before you actually get onto the implementation. And for me, this is what it basically looks like. Upfront analytics assessment. The amount of times that we've seen people go in and they will start doing all these deliverables and smashing all this stuff out, but they've not actually looked at the history of their analytics. They've not interviewed any of the people in the business about to build context around it. So we very rightly, when we first started the agency, we got fired within about 3 months for gross negligence. And I'm saying this publicly because we went in and we started, they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna, it's a medical website, so we need to think of EAT, blah, blah, blah. What we didn't realize is they'd been hit by a medic update 2 months before we got on board. And it was actually a recovery process we had to go through and not some convoluted EAT process. And that's where benchmarking and forecasting comes in as well. Where are you starting? Where do we want to go? When a lot of guys forecast, they'll do things like, we're going to give you 20% year-on-year growth, whatever it is. But if you don't look at what's been happening on the site for the past 18 to 24 months, you may be on a negative 20% trajectory. So if you tell the client, oh, I'm going to give you 20% year-on-year growth, what you're actually saying is I'm going to give you 40% year-on-year growth because you're going to be down 20% if we don't intervene. So if we do intervene, we'll put you back to normal. So just keep that in mind when you're building that stuff. You'll notice all the arrows in this particular diagram. That's because one thing depends on the other. And you'll notice that the technical audits come right at the very, very end. And there's so much you need to do to even get close to doing technical audits. So like we understand the site, we understand the business and the context that it's in. This is for people if you want to take it away. So when you download this deck, this is like a little bit of a reference point for you to understand what all these documents do, why you do it, and what it depends on. All right, so you've done all your auditing and all that good stuff, and then you get a big laundry list like this. Guys, have you ever been presented something as horrific as this by an agency or a freelancer?
No, but I presented something that looked pretty much like that once.
Yeah.
But I wasn't being asked for strategy, I was being asked for a to-do list. So if someone gave this to me as a strategy, I would ask them where the original document was that had led to this.
Yeah, it happens pretty often, right? You get a big laundry list, and ultimately, it's not a strategy, it's a to-do list. Now, when I hand this to clients, there's a whole range of reactions. So you get the SEO analyst, who's usually the youngest guy in the room, and he's like, oh my God, look at all that data, amazing. And then the head of SEO is like, oh, my life, look at all that data, I don't want that. The VP of marketing is just totally confused, and the CEO has got, who in this instance is a pirate, has got absolutely no idea what SEO is in the first place. So we're completely barking up the wrong tree. We're actually drilling into what they care about. The analyst who's going to be doing all the implementation for you, they just want to play with the tools, and they just want to like make changes and like see cool things happen in the SERPs. The head of SEO, here's the interesting thing for me. Every head of SEO at every company I've ever spoke to already knows considerably more than I do or my agency do, or more than we will ever know about the problems on their website, because they spend all day, every day auditing it and putting out fires. They don't want the laundry list. They know that. They want something compelling for the VP to sign off so they can get budget to actually do it. The VP just cares about ROI, and the CEO, well, depending on how big the company, they've usually got an earnings call every quarter. So they ultimately just care about money. And this is what they're typically in charge of. So an SEO analyst, do not ask them to do anything overly complex. They're writing, lines of meta and trying not to hang themselves at the depressing prospect of doing that for another day. Heads of SEO, typically writing Jira tickets and like implementing things by getting buy-in from people. The VP has usually got like bigger fish to fry. So they're looking at brand spend, social spend, brand direction, things like that. And the CEO is completely removed from the kind of marketing and the messaging. So they're just thinking about the profit and loss. So that brings me to something called a RACI. When I say I'm going to get racy when I might take it offline, that's usually after a couple of whiskeys. But in this instance, it stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And it's very, very important that you get your head around this when we go in to actually build the strategy out. The reason why I say that is because what a strategy essentially needs to be all things to all men. So you need to deliver the right information at the right time. So a great strategy for the guy in the R column, so the SEO analyst, would be to work out what actual resource they have in order to do the implementation and build implementation plans around them. The accountable people, they just need to understand what the ROI is going to be and how to get sign off from it. So like we're going to balance this differently as we go through it. All right. So again, before we touch anything, before we do anything, this is kind of like if any Friends fans are out there, this is like when Phoebe was teaching Joey the guitar. And she said, you're not allowed to touch it. Just make the shapes, make the bear claw shape first, and then you can eventually touch the guitar. This is what I'm telling you with SEO strategy. These are the 3 things you need to go through. Fix your analytics first and get pre-agreed values for everything. Build this RACI matrix so you understand who you're talking to, who's in charge of things. There's nothing worse. So I remember dealing with a kind of enterprise client and going in and saying, hey, we've got all these daisy chain redirects we need to fix. Who do we talk to? And the head of SEO was like, oh, that's fine. That's our sysadmin, Dave. Cool. Dave, sysadmin, these, oh, no, actually, you'll need to actually go and talk to the guy who does the Cloudflare integrations at the CDN level. That's that guy. I'm like, oh, okay. And you go, he's like, yeah, I'm the right guy. I'm like, cool. Well, here's the UK one, the Germany one. He's like, oh, I'll stop you there. The Germany one's this, and all of a sudden, my plan of getting this implemented within 2 weeks is now 2 months because I didn't properly understand the business that I was walking into. Again, here's your little takeaway. So when you're actually getting people onboarded, here's the questions they ask and the things that you need to know before you even touch a crawler. Okay, quiz time. I'll start with you, Gerry. In terms of value, out of these 2 completely arbitrary and unconnected SEO problems, what is the most important one?
It depends.
Ding, 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 ding. I knew you were going to say that. Why does it depend?
Yeah, I mean, I've found the amount of times where there's like critical broken links and it's like, you just need to get those fixed up. At the same time, often, the mixed content, it can be JavaScript, which is vital to conversion process. So I'm going to go with fixed mixed content because normally that's more site-wide than the broken links. That's my
thing. And what about you, Juliette? Now, you come from a content background, so you might be biased, but I'd love to hear. There's no right answer.
Straight away, particularly if they're on-site links. I'm less concerned about external links coming into the site, but broken links on the website. So interesting fact, I was doing a little bit of competitor research today, and I just happened to go across Amazon. Turns out in their drop-down menu, the link to their baby section, which is what the 5th category on their list, is broken. It goes, oh dear, there's a fault here. And I must be honest, considering how much I know about what baby drives in terms of revenue for companies like Amazon, that is a terrible, terrible experience. But more so than that, the bigger your site is, the more important your broken links are. If you've got a site of 20 pages, a couple of broken links can be overlooked because if your XML sitemap is sorted, you're kind of getting around that a little bit. When you hit 5 million pages, however, broken links are pretty much the only route to... Links are the only route that Google's going to be able to find its way through the site. There's almost no sitemap solution to that problem. So if your broken links are if your links are broken internally, and you have a massive site, Google is going to lose out on a hell of a lot of value out of your sites. And yes, I agree, JavaScript and there are elements on the page that can be really user journey. But if your pages aren't ranking from an SEO perspective, it doesn't matter whether they convert because your SEO traffic isn't going to find them.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And the
I
thing
quite
is,
agree
you're
with you.
both right in this one. On you go, Gerry.
But a lot of the time, the broken links are because, you know, blog posts are old, they're linking to out of stock, the expired products, things like that. So, you know, you've got thousands of old blog posts talking about bits and pieces. Do you spend time fixing up those old blog posts and fixing those broken links from, you know, 5 years ago? Or do you fix the critical mixed content in the homepage, the flow, where broken images are appearing everywhere and the site looks broken and it's big messages in the warning in the browser? I agree with you. Basically, you know, the amount of times where you've seen critical broken links and you think to yourself, how come nobody spotted that? But yeah.
I'm not talking about links in a blog that are slightly broken. I'm talking about when your category structure and your drop-down menu doesn't work.
Absolutely. And the thing is, you're both fundamentally right. And I think the fact that we could get into quite an in-depth conversation about that shows the extreme need for smart strategy. So for example, if, like you were just saying, like if the broken links are just somewhere on the blog, not really bothered. If it's the link to checkout, I'm really bothered. And the mixed content, if it's on the blog, I'm not really that bothered, to be honest. But if it's like a fundamental piece that actually makes the site operate, then I'm actually just going to ignore the fact that it's mixed content. So you're both right. And the fact that we've had a bit of a debate about it has kind of illustrated the point. It doesn't really matter what one is right or wrong or what one you need to put in terms of opinion when you've got no context. Because as Gerry says, it depends. But ultimately, you need to fix the thing with the highest commercial impact is ultimately what you're both saying to me. But the question is, how do we take 200 plus data points and find out what's actually valuable? So this very, very simplistic way of looking at it is I want to go in folder level. I want to see the amount of URLs and the amount of SEO errors you have. Now, this is the typical SEO way of doing things. Now, most SEOs who do not know how to build strategy will be like, well, that one's got the most errors, the shoes section. We should fix that because fixing more things that are broken is better than fixing less things that are broken, which is fine. But if I then say, okay, but here's the 12-month revenue for each of these folders and all the URLs inside of them, it fundamentally changes what you think is right and what you think is wrong. So whereas before, the thing with all the errors looked like the best option, it's now actually the thing that just drives the most revenue per URL and total revenue for the client. And this is a really hard thing to do. How can we take actual revenue impact and tie it back to making these SEO fixes? Well, one way to do it.
Just before you move on, there was one thing I wanted to quantify there. It could be that the reason that the revenue per URL is so low is because the number of errors is so high. So it could be that's preventing it from driving its true potential revenue. Whereas the reason Jeans has one of the lower options in terms of revenue, so it could be high selling price items combined with lower number of errors that's leading to this. So fixing a large volume of errors could lead you to greater revenue down the line. So it's why both SEO and business metrics have to be taken into account.
Absolutely. I could not agree more with that. Getting to that point where you can take, so going from here to then working out, all right, so I've got like 500 things to fix on all in different category levels. How do we start making that decision? Well, if we take what you've just said and what I've just said, and we start bundling all those things together, but calling them things that make sense to everyone universally. So when I say things like broken links and 404s and daisy chain redirects, that's a problem with the customer not being able to access the site. So I will actually bundle up all those problems because they're typically fixed in the same way. And it's an accessibility issue. So I will bundle that up and call it that. So I'll take all of those issues, which we'd call 404s, broken links, etc., and just call them that particular thing. And I do the same with every single SEO problem I have. At no point do I want to be saying words like hreflang or mentioning server codes to a VP of marketing. And now, if I'm speaking to the head of SEO, I'll of course do that, but that we want to keep step up a level and don't get too granular. So as Juliette just pointed out, like actually working out why these things are happening and actually coming up with a predefined value for all of these is really important for what we're just about to do. Now, the value of the fix is complete nonsense and totally arbitrary, but you need to get the client in the room with a good client manager and be like, here's the formula we're using to work out the kind of general value of these things. It's using real world analytics, real world metrics. So there is some truth and there is a trend line to follow here. However, there's no way that if we fix everything under the shoes category, I can guarantee you that exact revenue figure. It's not going to be a million miles away from it, but it's not going to be perfect. So you need to state that up front, that we're doing this in order to get close to an area where we can work out general values of things. The way in which we do that, really simply, we do a content drill down inside of GA. If you're using any other analytics platform, my heart goes out to you. And very simply, we want to take all the folders out. And then I just want to cross-reference that with the acquisitions report. And I want to get either your revenue or your goal completions if you're a lead generation company. So you just get that into a Google Sheet or Excel or something like that, and VLOOKUP them together in order to merge that information. Okay, so then we're going to go back to this big task laundry list. Now, if you're an agency out there, or if you're working with an agency, I honestly think they should have every single line item of things that they can possibly fix in a list. And I think they need to be able to time how long it takes for a block to be implemented. So for us, we work in 3-hour blocks, and we say things like, to fix 100 server errors, it will take me 3 hours. To rewrite 20 titles or 60 titles, it will take me 3 hours. To write a high quality piece of content, it will take me 3 hours. So like everything is blocked into these 3-hour blocks, so I can work out the basic cost of actually doing this. Now, if you're in-house and you're trying to get buy-in to do this, I would actually just take like average salaries of teams to work out the average hourlies. Or if you're agency, you usually work to day rate. So a general rule, actually, if you multiply by like $75 an hour, that's a pretty universal number that people can kind of get on board with. Then we want to take the actual cost of changing everything. So how much will it cost to fix this stuff, and merge it with the value of the fixing. And you'll notice here that under cost of fix, I've put that into those original groups. Customer can't access the site, the page organization is wrong, the page grouping is wrong, it's not displaying in Google correctly. And the reason why we're doing that is because if I look at the shoes folder, or imagine there's a blog folder in here, there's absolutely no way that the immediate commercial value, we're not talking about multi-channel funnel analysis at this point, the immediate commercial last click value to these particular landing pages is never going to be anywhere near the blog. And we're building that strategy out when it comes to implementing technical and SEO fixes. It's important that we have them segmented out according to folder, because if you're, let's say you're a homeware company, you sell sofas in one folder and you sell lamps in the other. A sofa's $2,000, a lamp's 20 quid, completely different metrics. So we need to be cognizant of that when we're building this stuff. And ultimately, we should get to a place like this where we've got all of the different folders and the ultimate cost of fix and the value of the fix, so we can do the kind of what I like to call Donald Trump on marijuana. He's high and leans to the right, and that's where we want to be when we're looking at these matrices. So we can see that jeans is the lowest physical cost, because I've reversed the matrices, the axis, should I say. And shoes is second there. So when it comes to actually writing up these plans, we've got something to base all of these recommendations on. All right, so using it in the wild, the next thing we need to do is start adding forecasts into play. So typically what we like to do is take the last 24 months of activity and just do linear regression all the way out for the next 12 months. That's our base. Our stretch would be based on the keywords that we're targeting and the folders we're targeting. You'd use some sort of click-through rate between 1 and 10 by looking at their search console and getting average click-through rates for each of those folders. And then moonshot would be something where we say, for half of these things we're going to try and get everything in the top 3. And you'll notice that everything's folder level, nothing's keyword level. It's important to do it like that so you don't get bogged down in this trying to rank for single keyword stuff. And lastly, make sure you update and review absolutely everything as you go along. The reason being, if you fail to actually do any of this implementation, but your forecast still says we're going to give you 20% year-on-year growth, But the thing, you can't anymore because the time it takes has changed. So every quarter, update your forecasts in line with everything and just remind them and use that updated forecast as a reason to get your strategy actually implemented with these companies. Oh, hey, client, we've had to update the forecast to actually delay hitting these targets that we want to hit because we've been unable to implement. Here's the cash consequence. Because you've done all these calculations already, you can say the consequence of not implementing this server update, the consequence of not rewriting those titles is X dollars, is X pounds. I guarantee you'll get a lot more done a lot quicker. So that brings us to the end.
Absolutely brilliant. Wonderful. I can now set up an agency and make some money. That was really, really, really interesting. And I'm really glad you got Gerry and Juliette involved along the way. That was a great presentation. We've had boatloads of questions coming in. And I've been looking through them, and in fact, quite a lot of them come back to one slide, and it's slide number 27. Thank you, Juliette, for pointing that out, where we have long-term vision, low-hanging fruit, pointless tasks, and nice to have. And the questions are kind of basic. Can you re-explain that, especially the pointless tasks? People are kind of wondering what the pointless tasks are and how you identify them.
Pointless task is something that the cost of fixing it outweighs the value of fixing it.
That's a very simple explanation. Wonderful. And then Simon Cox is asking, once you've got the low-hanging fruit, you've nailed all of that, what do you do next? How do you identify the next set of low-hanging fruit?
Well, low-hanging fruit to me would be an iterative thing. It's never a static, like this is the low-hanging fruit and that's it. It's a scalable list that as you work off the bottom, you work your way up, and each thing becomes progressively the most low-hanging fruit that you're working with.
Okay, brilliant. And we have somebody called 33 Big Money who sounds already pretty ambitious. And he has a question, what to do with a clean site? So he is very ambitious. If there are no errors on the pages and everything on page is perfect, what do you do? Gerry, what would you do if your site was perfect?
So at that point, you basically start to invest in customer research. You find out what they're looking for, how they're kind of interacting with your brand, and what content you need to kind of provide them with, kind of improving their journey. Generally speaking, I've never come across a pixel perfect site, but that said, sites are diminishing returns. At a certain point, you stop fixing kind of like the slight imperfections on your site, and you start investing in great content, outreach, kind of making sure that your offline PR, so offsite PR is perfect. And generally you keep investing in that direction. It isn't something where you can kind of ever say, my site is perfect, because Google keep changing their algorithm slightly. They kind of introduce new metadata, they introduce schema or something like that. So you can kind of turn around and say, actually, my site was perfect 6 months ago, but now I can add in a video XML sitemap or do something different that's kind of like different and challenging. Is mobile different? Do you have to have a markup for FAQs or something like that? So, you can say it's almost perfect, but there's enhancements that can be made.
Yeah, I love that. The idea of enhancements is always something you can do. There's always something you can push forward. Absolutely brilliant. Now,
Jason,
Ross,
can I butt in and double in for that? Listen, 33 Big Money. If your name and your real life persona are the same, what you need to do is email me and let us get some links for you, mate. That's the absolute best thing that you can possibly do. No, I'm only jesting.
Oh, well, that was a great sales pitch. That was wonderful. Now, how do you decide how big the scope of a strategy should be? I'll leave that one open.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how much cash is physically available and how much resources are available. So a lot of the times, if there is a low retainer client, but they've got a massive in-house team, that's not a problem. You just take a consulting role and you help and guide them through the actual implementation side. And most of the scope inside of the strategy, this is where the RACI comes in. This is where the business questionnaire comes in. You'll very quickly know what they can and can't do when you go and speak to them. And sometimes it's not a resources issue. Sometimes it's the technology they've got and the technical debt they've built up that's going to stop them from actually doing a bunch of the stuff you want to do. Juliette, you had some really good points on that as well, like how to define the scope of the strategy, like when it comes to resources and stuff.
Well, part of it, I mean, a big part of it is what they have the resource to actually be able to implement, because we can create these huge, beautiful strategies and these massive to-do lists, but if they don't have the developers available, or if they have technical debt that will overwhelm them, that you chasing that strategy and you chasing that work and creating these huge ideas isn't actually going to help them as a business. And sometimes you've got to stop and think about, okay, yes, I'm an agency or I'm a consultant, but let me think about what is best for the client, and say what is actually going to work best for their business, what's going to help them get ahead of this. So resources for me is a far bigger thing than what they can afford. A strategy can, I mean, you don't build a huge strategy, but you can take a big strategy and break it into smaller blocks for long-term delivery if you have a client with a smaller budget. But you cannot break down something that's intrinsic if you don't actually have the resources to be able to implement it.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, on to what factors could make you decide that a strategy needs to be changed? I like that question, because we kind of lay into this strategy, and a lot of, I think, especially, I mean, you've got more experience with this than I do, Ross. You get fixed into a strategy, your budget's set, you've got your work going. At what point do you say we actually need to change this because it's not going to work? Gerry, maybe.
That one is normally when you just know that the research tells you it's not going to be a positive ROI. I mean, great examples are when you're sort of chasing the head terms that we were talking about before. The best examples are hotels that chase head terms, when actually if they're chasing the sort of the longer tail terms. So for instance, you know, you'll never rank for like hotels in London, but you might rank for hotels near Paddington. That's the time when you kind of know that your strategy isn't quite right. It's basically when you have to adapt it to your client needs, the ROI, and so on and so forth. Also, depending on like the resources you've got. If you've got, as Ross was saying, basically if you've got developers available, then sometimes your strategy will be to fix everything on the site because you've actually got the available on-site resource. If you've got no content writers, then you might have to kind of apply a different technique, a different strategy. So classically, the strategy should apply to what your resources are and what's actually needed to get done, and also what's achievable. As I say, you'll never rank for certain terms, but let's kind of figure out what you can rank for and what you can do, and then sort of almost take it from there. What will actually bring the greatest ROI?
Okay. And Michael Rapino's just asked a question. Have there been times when your strategy was sound, the work you've done was by the book, but you're not seeing any results, Ross, as an agency owner? And is it awful?
Yeah, all the time, and it is a complete lie. Like, see, when you look at an agency website and they've got like case studies, or they come in and pitch you, and here's all our credentials, and they're like, here's all the amazing things we've done. Oh, we've got 40 clients in the books, but here's 5 of them that we've just cherry picked. You're like, pull the other one. Come on, bud. Yeah, of course, man. Like you do things by the book, and things that the needle's not moving. Like, it's really unusual. So if you take this over a longer time period, if you do it over 3 months, it's not moving. Like, I would expect to see something if you're implementing on the site, but like take over a longer time period. We had an example where a client had just replatformed over to an AngularJS single page application for a brochure site. Ultimately, a horrific idea. A development company went in and completely oversold something that could have just been a like nice, easy WordPress design and build. Fair enough, these things happen. And we got 6 months into the project, all the content was up, the links were working, we had a bunch of, all the rendering issues were fixed, and we just weren't quite seeing it yet. And then we hit it with a bunch of very large links, and all of a sudden the trickle started, then there was an update, and then eventually it started to spike. So timing might be a thing, but yeah, Michael, like all the time, like it's completely disingenuous to say that we're all amazing and we've got all the answers.
Brilliant stuff.
I've lost count of the number of times that's happened. You can do incredible work. Everything, like do everything that Google and other search engines are telling you to do is the right thing to do, and your competitors can be doing something completely different. I know in the last session they were talking about people who shouldn't theoretically be ranking or shouldn't be performing as well as they are, but somehow do. That your site doesn't exist in isolation. You can do all the right things, but someone else is doing it better, faster, more. They're doing black hat, gray hat. They're implementing other strategies. So your strategy is great in your lane, but all the lanes around you are doing something slightly different. So when you take this into account, and I mean, as Ross said, time is a huge factor. if 2 weeks from now the client's asking, why aren't we ranking even though we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing, that's your key point. 9 months from now, if the client's asking the same thing, like, why aren't we doing this? The question is, why aren't we? Why are we looking at keyword ranking in isolation as being the success metric? But also, what has Google done in the meantime to change the playing field quite a lot?
Yeah, I mean, how do you answer a client who comes in and is envious? I mean, I have this, they're terribly envious of their competitors, saying they're doing it all wrong, but they're still ranking. What do you say to them? How do you get them back on board when they're sulking, basically?
One of the things you've got to remember is that, go on, Jules.
I'm saying, how do they know that it's all wrong? But what is their empirical evidence that it's all wrong? How are they able to see the entirety of someone else's strategy? Because what they may be saying is, oh, they're doing spammy link building, or they're doing, I don't know, auto-generated content, or these or the other things.
Yeah.
What is it that they're judging on it? Because it's great. It's easy to judge someone from the outside without actually knowledge of what's going on internally. What if you have huge technical debt that they don't have? So they've got a nice clean site. They've done all the things they're supposed to do. They're doing PWAs, they're doing AMP, they're doing all the stuff that they're supposed to do. And you're going, yeah, we might be able to do MWeb next year.
Okay, brilliant.
Sorry, go back on that one. One of the things that a lot of websites are kind of struggling with is the fact that Google can just come in and basically totally change the SERP layout. I mean, all of the job boards, for instance, suffered a couple of years back when Google said, hey, we're going to do job listings for everything. Flights, they're already in trouble at the moment, but they've suffered in the same way. Google don't owe us the 10 blue links. They kind of owe the kind of user experience. But at the same time, Google's out there as a big business to make money, and they will literally be there just to kind of try and make as much revenue and profits as possible. And sometimes that will screw you over if you are doing everything correct. Everything that classically should work, everything that would work, Google have just changed the playing field, and they're going to do it. They're going to do it time and time again. As Google comes in with increasingly being the answer engine, as Jason likes to talk about, we are going to find that, sometimes Google will kind of not even give you any traffic at all.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people talk about algorithm updates. I honestly pay much more attention to SERP layout changes than I do to algorithm updates. Although, in fairness, I have noticed that they tend to go hand in hand. So when everyone's running around talking about an algorithm update over here, I'm generally looking at the SERP updates, using the Semrush tool. It's super handy to see what's going on particularly in the shopping space. But one of the biggest things I think Google's changed the playing field, and it used to just be whether it was productized queries. Now it's everything. Is shopping ads. So you can go and search for almost anything, and Google will still have PLA shopping ads there. And we did some user research at my big client that indicated that people directly told us they fundamentally change how they think while they're doing their searches if they see shopping ads. So we're not necessarily taking those aspects into account when we say, is it working or is it not working?
Brilliant stuff. That's a really, really good point. I like that. Another question from Cindy Crum, I believe, in the guise of Mobile Moxie. How do you train new young employees to think about the bigger picture in SEO like you guys do? Who'd like to jump on that one?
Well, you need a big stick, and what you do with new employees is ultimately, you just get them to take a little bit of a step back and get them to just run their own campaigns and get them to shadow account managers or just watch all the problems that arise on the phone calls when you're doing the implementation. And then you need to incentivize them to start thinking like that. A lot of people use money. I obviously do the fruit box thing, give them a pineapple or something like that. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, you've got to get them in that particular strategy headspace. So when you ask them, hey, what would you do here? They'll usually give you the tactic. And as long as they know that it's a tactic, not a strategy, you're like, cool. Zoom out, and tell them to use non-SEO language. If I hear them talking to a client and they're like, we're going to, this header response and this daisy chain and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, stop. Unless it's the SEO competent client on the phone, it's usually not. It's usually the account manager. No SEO language allowed. And the other one is would your grandmother understand what you've just told that person? And if the answer is no, you're thinking tactically, not strategically. And that's ultimately how I do it.
Okay, brilliant. Your grandmother's strategic. I love that. Really quickly, Gerry, and then we're going to have to close this session up. Go ahead, Gerry.
Okay.
You were saying something.
Oh no, rubber ducks. Basically, one of the things that I like to do is basically the developers that I sit with have these rubber ducks everywhere. It took me a while to figure out why they had rubber ducks everywhere, but basically it's a form of programming. They like to explain things to a rubber duck, and if it kind of it's a kind of way of doing it. And I think the same thing applies to SEOs. The amount of times where people are kind of talking through HTTP header response of a 410 or something, and I'm kind of going, that doesn't make any sense to the person you're talking to. The other thing that I think that all young SEO people suffer from is tools. They kind of export something from a tool and they don't think it through. And I think that's often the case. And they kind of go, oh, you'll improve your rankings. This is the CTR curve and things like that. But whereas they don't look at the search results. One of the things that Jules, Ross, myself, we do quite a lot is that, in fact, Jay said you're the expert at this one. We look at the search results. We look at how the actual page actually looks when you search for a particular key term. I think a lot of people are so dependent on the tools output, and they don't kind of understand the impact of Google's sort of changing. So basically, I think that actually it sounds crazy, but young SEO people need to actually search more, use Google more, which they probably already do without really thinking about it, but they actually need to use it and kind of like analyze the results.
Brilliant. That's a lovely conclusion. Young people should search more. That was an absolutely great session, great presentation from Ross, great comments from Juliette and Gerry. Thank you very much. To wrap it up, can you tell everybody where they can find you online? We can start with Juliette.
You can find me online at LinkedIn. It's kind of hard to miss me. I think I'm the only person with my name.
Oh, brilliant. And the pink jumper. Gerry, where can we find you online?
I'm everywhere. I'm on Twitter, I'm on TikTok, I'm on everywhere. Basically, @Dergal is the thing that I've been using, DERGAL, and LinkedIn.
Thank you. And Ross?
typeamedia.net or canonicalchronicle.com for all your weekly SEO news and ridiculous SEO-based memes is where you can find me.
Yeah, watch the Canonical Chronicle because it's a great name and a wonderful podcast or video presentation. I don't really know what you call it. Thank you very much for everybody.